Governor, to you first. You were one of the few Democrats who did rally with President Obama in 2010. Can you speak about the impact it has on the midterms when a president does stump for a candidate?
Oh, absolutely. It's hugely significant, not just for this big year when there's 36 governors up. It's significant for the type of Congress that we have for the next 10 years. So in 2010, we got demolished. Our party lost. We went from about 29 governors down to 20. We lost so many state and local offices that then we were saddled with redistricting and borders that put into Congress from places that had overwhelming majority of Democratic voters, nonetheless a lopsided delegation of Republican congresspeople.
Then are Democrats making a mistake here because the president is clearly flooding the zone?
No, well, Democrats are not making a mistake. We don't have the presidency, but we do have some great candidates. Stacey Abrams in Georgia, Andrew Gillum in Florida. If you look at the Great Lakes, you see that we are possibly in a position to sweep all of those big Great Lakes states, not only Pennsylvania, where Tom Wolf is taking care of business, but Cordray is within the margin of victory in Ohio. You have Scott Walker. I was tired of Scott after one term. You would think the people of Wisconsin would be tired after 3. That looks like it's within the margin of error. And, of course, Minnesota, Illinois. This is all very significant. And then there's some exciting outliers in Kansas, where Laura Kelly is poised within that margin of victory. And also there's Nevada, Sisolak within the margin of victory in Nevada. So I think anyone that's within the margin of victory right now is going to be looking at a very strong finish on election night.
Well, I think Scott the governor could have just given you every state and every race.
He may have. If Scott Walker is talking about that Foxconn plant arriving, maybe those voters could call the state of Pennsylvania where that plant never arrived. Ron, I want to ask you about Florida. And the president is going there tonight. He's going to appear with Senate candidate and current governor Rick Scott. And I want to share what Yahoo News had in an article I thought was very funny. Quote, on Halloween this Wednesday, Rick Scott will dress up as a candidate who wants to appear with President Trump on the campaign trail. Is this about politics? Is it about getting the vote out? What are they doing here?
I suspect it's more turnout than anything else. I mean, Mr. Gillum's running a good campaign so far in Florida. The president said some rather harsh things about him, I believe calling him a stone-cold thief a couple of days ago. So that should mobilize Democrats in Florida who may not appreciate that rhetoric. So I suspect it's more about turnout than it is about policy in Florida, particularly since Mr. Gillum happens to at least appear for the moment to be leading that race by at least a small amount.
Governor, walk us through strategy. The president is headed to 8 states, but he is not going to contested races in states like Nevada, Texas, and New Jersey. As a veteran of the DGA, walk us through the strategy of where the president should go. Where would he be the most impactful?
Well, it looked from your presentation that he was going to those places where he has the greatest shot of keeping a congressional district there in the upcoming redistricting. So I don't want to get too far ahead of us, but redistricting happens in just 2 years. So these 36 men and women that are elected governors will affect redistricting. He's also looking at the Senate and looking at those places where he can hold on to what is already a thin margin in the United States Senate. He doesn't want to, make the mistake of not getting out there and campaigning and then find that he wakes up the next morning and he's lost a couple of Senate seats that they might have dug out. But Claire McCaskill's a fighter, and I think she's going to pull this out in Missouri. And so the president has his work cut out for him, but then so do we. What you're going to see from the Democrats are numbers of surrogates out there. I know that Vice President Biden plans to be in Ohio. I myself have been in 30 states over the course of the last year, and I'm also focused.
Then what's the number one thing people told you they care about?
Yeah, you know what people care about more than anything else is that we seem to be losing that spirit of moderation, civility, love and respect for one another. It seems to have gone missing out there, and people are looking for decent men and women to pick it up and lift it up into our public discourse. I mean, what these candidates, I've campaigned for a lot of people, Stephanie, running for state senates and state house, and we have the opportunity, hard to get into that with everything that's going on, but we have the opportunity to flip a lot of those chambers. And you know what each of these men and women tell me? They say that nobody brings up Donald Trump when they knock on the doors. It's almost like he's the dark canvas against which their messages of dignity, decency, hard work, health care, education, being able to get ahead and do better by your family, these are the messages that our men and women are running with. And if the special elections are any indication, the 100 that have happened, it appears that it's a winning message.
And Ron, I want to share for you what RNC Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel said about the Republican strategy, because when I hear what she says, I start to think, okay, maybe, but it's not what Trump says. So take a look.
We're running on higher wages, more jobs, our economy doing well, taking on the opioid crisis. I mean, there's so many things that have come out of these first 2 years of President Trump and Republican leadership. And we're saying to voters, do you want to go back?
Okay, so really quickly, in terms of do you want to go back? If we're talking wages and the economy was on a steady rise since President Obama was elected. So anyone, Laura Lee Trump, I'm talking to you, who says there was a turnaround in the economy when President Trump was elected, I invite you to study Economics 101.
Well, there was a modest acceleration.
There was a modest acceleration. Yeah. That's not a turnaround.
Correct.
But what she is talking about is the opposite of what President Trump is talking about. All he's talking about is a migrant caravan and mobilizing the military to a border when, by the way, the caravan's not even arriving weeks from now. Think about the resources putting forth and the expense of that.
Well, and I think what the governor said is right. I mean, they're not running on the economy, even though we have the lowest unemployment rate since about 1969, 2000.
GDP in a great place.
Yeah, it's in a great place. Listen, it's a modest acceleration from what we've seen over the last couple of years. President Obama enjoyed some similar numbers throughout his 2 terms. But you do have a very strong economy. You have more jobs than you have unemployed individuals in the United States. One reason why we need immigrants in the U.S. is to fill some of those jobs. And as you mentioned, Stephanie, the stock market's become extremely volatile, worried that the economy is beginning to slow, that the global economy is slowing, that some of the policies put in place, we have to borrow $1.34 trillion this year in order to finance an unfunded tax cut. All of these things are issues that seem to be resonating even more than a strong economy, which is counterintuitive and certainly counter to what's driven politics in the past.
Governor, to your last point, when you talked about Americans are looking for civil, decent, moderate, open-minded government leaders, do you worry that in both parties we are pushing to the right and the left and that exhausted majority is getting pushed out?
Yeah, and don't let me misconvey. By moderate, I don't mean illiberal. In other words, I'm not talking about, what I'm talking about is the spirit of moderation. That ability to listen to one another, realize, hey, you know what, we can advance this, we can do better together. I might not get everything that I want, you might not get everything that you want. And yes, we are in danger of losing that. We're in danger of losing that by driving the last partisan advantage to its bitter end. And we need to elevate the common good and what's good for our nation. You know what phrase a lot of our candidates are using out there? It is a very localized, we need to save our democracy right here in Kansas or Iowa or New Hampshire. It's a sense that Americans have that they might not be able to vote in the presidential race, but by golly, if they respond to the messages of dignity and decency and solidarity, they can make things better in their own home place. You know, Ron was talking about, and we were all talking about the economy doing better, but the measure is not only jobs, it's also pay and wages. And in a lot of places, people are not doing better. Well, they're seeing costs outstrip their wage increases.
Yeah, at that point, inflation has accelerated faster than wages.
And part of that has to do with the tariffs, too, because input costs for companies are rising, so they're pushing those cost increases onto consumers.
And consumers haven't even seen the real cost increase from the tariffs yet.
No, they have not. And in fact, the president has suggested that come December or January, he could impose an additional additional tariffs on $250 billion of Chinese goods, which would then represent everything that China sends to us. So that would affect the economy. It's already slowed the rest of the world. And I think, though, with respect to what the governor's saying, this, and not to contradict the illiberal statement, but I go back to the year 2000 when Bill Clinton and Tony Blair were talking about a third way, taking the best ideas from conservatives, the best ideas from liberals, and trying to find common ground that is pragmatic and practical. And we don't see that
Ron,
in any way, shape, or form.
we've talked about a third way forever, and it doesn't find its lane.
Well, it does not.
Well, that's partly because, you know, the Republican Party kind of went off the edge. There's no one to dance with there when it comes to things like making college more affordable. I mean, great
progressives are doing it too with unfundable promises. You know, you cannot do some things that some of the progressives are talking about without radical reshaping of the federal budget priority.
Yeah, well, I balanced the budget every year for 8 years. Was one of 7 that had kept a AAA bond rating all the way through the recession, and yet we went 4 years in a row without increasing college tuition. We extended health care coverage to 300,000 people. You have to work within budgets, yes, but look, there's a true north to our country. It's greater inclusion to greater numbers of people and allowing people to get ahead when they work hard. And those are all things that are being undermined by the vitriol and by the strange ideology that's gripped the Republican Party. And I think the Democrats are going to be an affirmative vehicle to respond to that and bring us back to a course of forward rather than back.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.